Okay, what will Ireland be like in 20 years' time? The recent report of the Central Statistics Office suggests that there will be vast changes. For example, it could be the majority of people living in Dublin between the canals will be non-Irish. Overall, Dublin's population will rise by 2 million. Places like Westmeath, Carlow, Kilkenny and Laois and Offaly will double in population. 10% of Dublin's population will move out. Nearly 250,000 immigrants will move in. I'm joined by David McWilliams, who's working a book on Ireland of the future, and Tony Fahy. Sketch it out, David. 2021.
Well, Tom, if you look at what the CSO said last week,
right,
what they painted a picture was of an Ireland looking not unlike America, North America, where the cities become hollowed out of white Irish people, let's say, indigenous Irish people, and they're replaced by immigrants. And the flight of the white Irish to the suburbs is very pronounced. I mean, the CSO said about 115,000 Irish people leaving Dublin and about 250,000 immigrants coming in. So what you see is what you've seen in the United States, where the centers of the cities become more immigrant in nature.
Okay, so take me on a walking tour of Dublin.
If you go on a walking tour of Dublin, it's very likely that, for example, Dublin 1, the area between, let's say, the Docklands and Phoenix Park, that arc just north of the Liffey,
right,
will probably be largely Chinese and African in nature.
Okay.
And you'll also see little places like Drumcondra, which at the moment is one of the oldest populations in the city, becoming quite trendy and actually flipping, becoming more like Ranelagh is now. And the reason is very simple. You see this also happening in London. The Islingtons and the Shoreditches and the Hoxtons, all those areas beside immigrant areas become quite hip as multicultural Irish people want to live quite close to the immigrants, but not so close as their kids go to the same schools. So, for example, you'll find lots of, let us say...
They want their food, but not their company.
They want their Somalian, let's say Tuesday night, their Somalian dish, but what they really don't want is their kids going to a national school, which has got 29 different languages and a relief teacher from Moldova teaching. And that is the sort of vista where you see in the central London, you see it in central New York, and ultimately it seems the implication of what the CSO is saying here.
Now take me outside the M50. We're going down to Kildare, Carlow, Laois. What's happening
if you look
down
at
there?
Well,
these are the outburbs.
The exurbs. Exurbs, and they are not suburbs. They are not suburbs. They're quite different. If you look at, again, what the CSO is saying, just think about it. There's going to be a new M50 built probably in an arc, a tarmac arc, from Drogheda all the way around to Arthur.
1,000 years, go on.
Well, you never know, it may or may not, but the point is, Tom, if you look, do you ever watch Desperate Housewives, Tom?
I'm afraid I have not developed that skill yet.
Oh, come on, of course you do.
Desperate Husbands is bad enough.
Desperate Husbands. Anyway, if you watch Desperate Housewives, what you see...
I will watch it now.
What you see is a portrait of an ex-burb in the United States, where you have cosmetically enhanced individuals living in what are more or less...
This is Portlaoise 2025,
This is Portlaoise,
right?
This is... Well, in actual fact, Mullingar is the colonic irrigation capital of Ireland.
Oh, my God.
According to one of the largest plastic surgery outfits here, Mullingar is the colonic... So it's happening already. This is just a superannuated version of it. And ultimately what you're going to have, Tom, is you're going to have these exurbs, which, unlike the present commuter belt, might not necessarily be commuting. They may actually be much more autonomous areas.
Okay, yes, all right. I mean, apart from population shifts, what are the implications for roads, for transport, for schools, for all of the structure of planning?
Well, if I could just say first, I don't think we should lose the run of ourselves on
we
on
like
the question. Last year, the composition of the migrant population, there was about 50,000 immigrants into Ireland last year, but 1/3 of them were Irish.
Yeah.
1/3 of them were from the EU 15, and 1/3 were from the rest of the world. So we're not talking about hordes of say Africans or whatever it is. They're a very small proportion.
We're not suggesting that, but we're suggesting that.
I think people...
But didn't Nearest say 250,000 in the next 20 years?
But we imagine that the word immigrant means a sort of a... well, one of the big questions, a lot of them will be Irish, returning Irish.
Right.
And that is still the case. The returning Irish are still the biggest block of immigrants coming back.
But would you accept David's picture of a completely different cast?
Not at all. No, I don't think so. I think the possibility that Ireland would be like the United States is as far as ethnic composition is concerned, is not realistic. The United States,
terms of the places where people live, in terms of the outburbs, the suburbs, that picture he presents?
Now, a lot of this is in our own control. It's not an automatic projection from the current situation, and there is maybe at last and maybe over the next 5 years there will be a determined effort to try to control, make decisions about how this should happen, rather than simply
those voices on the streets wouldn't agree with you, Tony. All those voices on the streets have one thing in common: this place is fundamentally and fast changing.
Well, it is changing in a lot of directions, and there are many country towns up and down the country where there are now clusters of foreign nationals that nobody would have dreamt could have been there 5 or 10 years ago. In fact, I was in Gort in County Galway there last weekend, and there are 400 or 500 Brazilians in that town, and they seem to be fitting in very well. Everybody's a good word to say, but it would have been it would have been it would have been something that would have been unimaginable 10 years ago, and certainly that's going to happen.
But David, you
see, what is unimaginable is that the football team in Gort will be called Flamingos, which it probably will be after the great Brazilian soccer team. Now, ultimately, you've got to look at the two big trends in the country, one of which, and in the world, not necessarily in this country, one of which is immigration, which is going to accelerate rather than decelerate over the course of the next coming years. Unless, of course, Bob Geldof gets it right in the third world, and the third world does an economic sort of turnaround. That's the first thing. The second thing is that what you tend to happen in immigration patterns is once you have immigrants, like for example in the 80s, if your brother was in New York, you'd go to New York. If your cousin's in New York, you'd go to New York. And ultimately what you have is you have a self-generating process of immigration. Now, what I'm saying is that we have to imagine the unimaginable. Because if we actually sat here 10 years ago and you said to me there'll be 600 Brazilians in Gort, I would have said, come on. We've got to imagine the unimaginable. We've got to think, wait a sec, Tom, we've got to think what is largely probable. And what is largely probable is what the CSO, unless, of course, Tony disagrees with the CSO, what they've said here is that you will see a massive change in the ethnic complexion of the country. Now, that is something that we should prepare ourselves for, not necessarily in any apocalyptic way, but ultimately say, this is likely what's going to happen.
But let me also ask you about the change in the physical structures that these outburbs, these exburbs, will become towns on their own. And why will large numbers of people move out of Dublin down the country?
Well, again, what you see, if you look, for example, let's look at London.
Yeah.
Look at London. In central London, you have a much, much higher population of immigrants. And as you move out towards the M25, the immigrant population thins out. That seems to be the logical way things happen. Exactly the same in Paris.
The English begin beyond the M25 belt.
The English begin beyond the M25. Exactly the same happened in Paris, and exactly the same has happened in every urban centre where there's been immigration, not only in Europe, but also, of course, in the United States as well. Now, unless we are exceptionalists to an enormous degree, unless we break the trends of other countries, we will see something very similar happening here too.
Tony?
Well, the CSO doesn't say that there's going to be a very dramatic change in the ethnic composition of the population. More than half of the population increase is going to be due to natural increase, in other words, the excess of births over deaths. And they don't forecast what the ethnic composition of the migrant stream will be. And in fact, they really don't. I mean, they couldn't do that because they've it's largely only guesswork anyway. And the likelihood is that an awful lot of it is going to be from within Europe. And so there isn't going to be ethnic...
But people from within Europe, I mean, Lithuanians are ethnically different to Irish people.
But non-nationals.
Well, we're talking about...
Yeah,
well, we're not even sure about that. As I say, the only hard information we have
Tony,
on that is that up until now...
Walk around Dublin, open your eyes.
I know that there is an increasing mix, but it's not going to be... In the United States, something like 25% of the population is, say, non-white. You have a Hispanic... and of course, the big difficulty in social structure in the United States is not arising from immigration. It's the
But Tony, we're not talking about colour, we're talking about origin, right?
Yes.
Can you accept that? We're talking about origin.
Yes.
So we can call these people non-nationals in a sense.
Well, they're not necessarily non-nationals, because as a third of them are returning Irish. Even last year, a third of the migrant stream into Ireland was Irish.
We talked a lot about Dublin. Talk about the suburbs and down the country.
Let's look at
changes down there, David.
For example, again, the CSO says that the fastest growing region, with an increase of population of 51%, will be called the Mid-East. As opposed to the American Midwest, we have the Mid-East. And these are Westmeath and Carlow and Laois and Offaly. These counties are going to see the fastest rise in population. Now, ultimately, what you're going to have, therefore, is either the people will commute and live in the Nace Road hell that is commuting to Dublin, or else gradually these areas will become, as they do in the United States,
Their own cities.
their own places
Of work.
Exactly.
Right.
And that is the huge change.
And when will that linkage, this notion that you only work in Dublin between the canals, when will that linkage be broken? Because that is the root of a huge planning crisis, a huge traffic crisis.
Precisely. And I think, again, these are organic issues. There's not one day a sort of a diktat from on high, which says that now you will change. But ultimately, the costs associated with commuting, with childcare, with housing, and ultimately for companies getting people, which is an enormous cost,
For example,
will change. And you will find companies moving out to your Mullingars, to your Tullamores of this world. Rather than people moving to find companies, you'll find companies moving to find people.
But can I just say, that is a new culture, because I was looking recently at arguments about where the new Abbey Theatre would be built, and they were going to build it in O'Connell Street. And the notion in this day and age that somebody could get from anywhere outside Dublin to O'Connell Street, park a car at 7 o'clock and go to theatre, it's madness.
But if they could take the Lewis...
Where would you put it, Tom? You can put it in an ace, would you?
Why not?
Well, but I mean,
You were going to say, Tony?
Well, you see, I said that it is government policy now that they cultivate these growth centres outside of Dublin. This is the National Spatial Strategy. And one of the worries people have is not so much that... is that won't be pursued with sufficient consistency. But, in fact, one of the great concerns is that you will have this one-off rural housing policy. 40% of the new dwellings in Ireland are one-off rural dwellings. Right. And that it won't be Tullamore and Mullingar that will grow. It'll be a thin carpet of housing all over Leinster. And the transportation issues that arise as a consequence of that, where everybody has, even people living within striking, if Tullamore, say, were to become a growth centre, or Portlaoise, even people living within that hinterland, they could be driving 20 miles to work.
And finally, an economic question. Apparently, in this new world of the future of Ireland, one of the most valuable things will be land. Am I correct?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But
Why?
Not in the future. Now. Land is...
Are we running out of it?
It's not that we're running out of it, but we're running out of zoned land. But more importantly, there's loads of money and not enough land, and that's driving the price of land through the roof. And ultimately, it's the price of land which is dictating our development, rather than our development dictating the price of land. And that is possibly unique in the world.
Tony?
Well, it's the whole question of land management and a land policy and land development policy is going to have to be tackled in the future. And it is true that that with a growth of 25% in population, this now one would hope at last that this will come onto the agenda in a much more serious way than it ever.
Well, thank you both. But we will be happy, David, in the future. We will be rich, wealthy, and we'll all be.
I think the country will be a post-Irish future, Tom.